My name's Tony Hilliard. Today I'm going to change the water pump on a 1953 MGTD. This is a car that's beautifully restored, but even newer components can fail. This one, it started to leak water pump. First noticed it on the underside of the bonnet. You get a track of rusty water just starting to show. So time to do it now. I bought a water pump, a replacement one. I've given it a coat of paint, let it harden off nicely. Now, quite often these replacement pumps, which are obviously made overseas somewhere, don't fit very well. So we might have a problem, we might need to modify the part that goes into the block. The other thing we have to remember, when we change the pump, put the gasket on, I prefer to use gasket cement as well, but we're going to need to put some gasket cement on the bolts that go into the block. Otherwise, eventually, we're going to get water weeping out through the threads that hold the water pump on. So something to remember. Let's see how we get on.
This is the water pump, manufactured with this cutout here. It still needs modifying. 1952 MGTD, not 53 as I stated. And this is the track on the underside of the bonnet which shows the water pump is starting to go.
I'm going to try and fit this water pump. She's just in here. We're going to try and fit it without taking the radiator and the bonnet off. I've made up a piece of cardboard to save my knuckles and also save damaging the radiator. It's 30 centimetres by 23 centimetres, or if you're still in Imperial, it's 12 inches by 9. It's easier to put it in from the dynamo side. So the next thing we've got to do is drain the water out.
This is the water tap. Don't forget to put a bowl underneath it, and don't forget to turn it off when you've finished. Dynamo, first thing we do is slacken off the adjustment nut at the top. And there are two underneath, one at the front and one at the back. Give it a push forward and we can unloop the fan belt. Now we've just got to threadle it round the fan. There are 4 bolts in here. There are 4 11/32 bolts holding the fan on. This is what the pulley looks like with the bolts in position. You can see they're going to be quite long and fiddly to get out. There's a question, a little bit of patience. Undo the 4 long 11/32 bolts. That's what they look like. Once you've got the 4 undone, you can lift the fan blades. There's 2 blades actually, one over the top of the other. They're a bit fiddly. There we are. Now we can attack the 4 bolts holding the water pump onto the block. Now we need to undo the clips holding the radiator hose on. It's usually a good idea to get plenty of WD-40 on where the rubber hoses join the steel hoses, because they can be a devil to get off. Prise the hose a little bit, let a WD-40 soak into the joint. Undo the rest of the clips. Give it a good tug, off she comes. Now the tricky one is usually the one onto the radiator. You might need a little bit more WD-40 there. And if you put a screwdriver gently down between the hose and the steel tube, you can get the WD-40 to soak in. Give it a tug, there we go. Pull the other small hose off, start doing the 2 bolts around this side. Now this is where I remembered you've got to take the pulley off to get to the bottom nut holding the engine steady on. And if you don't undo that, you can't get the water pump off. Now you have to take the engine steady off. It is very fiddly because the centre part isn't fixed, so there's nothing to hold it. It just keeps turning. I've modified it. I'll show you a little bit later on. I've brazed on a nut there and a nut there, so at least you can hold it and stop it twisting when you're undoing it. Right, we need to take the spacer off the front of the water pump where the fan goes on. There are two flats on the front of this pulley that you need to get hold of to stop the pulley turning as you undo it. And it's a 1/2 inch nut. Off she comes. Take off the big adjustable. And in theory, the pulley should come off. Now we can get to the final nut at the bottom of the water pump, which also holds the engine steady on. This is a rubber hammer, by the way. Give it a tap. I know you're going to scrap it, but it still doesn't mean you want broken pieces everywhere. So tap it off with a rubber hammer, then gently prise it off. You're going to put a new gasket on, so don't worry too much about that. Here's the offending article. Take the gasket off. Bottom one is the old pump, top one is a new one. You can see a slightly different shape, make them fit. I've put a mirror in there so you can actually see the front of the block. That's where we're going to have to clean it up. Usually use a little wire brush, give it a good clean off, and then you want to wipe it over with something like acetone to make sure it's completely dry. Now we're going to grind that off now. I've put some masking tape around the actual pump vane because we don't want any muck and bullets going in there while we're grinding it off. Looking good. Compare it with the original one. A little bit more to come off, I think. Right, we're going to try this. See how she looks. Now, need to take the masking tape off, otherwise we're not going to get it in the hole. Right, there she goes. It's not quite going flush. It's obviously still touching somewhere. I've reground the edge a little bit where it was touching the gasket from the timing chain cover and round the other side. And she goes in snugly now. There we are, nice and flush. Right, a little bit of gasket cement, not too much, you don't want to go everywhere. The mounting for this, by the way, is part of an old electric motor, which is perfect. Put the gasket on. Nice thin layer of gasket cement. This is a mock-up before I put it all together. Once you've got the pulley on, getting the bolts lined up for the spacer is a devil of a job. So if you put it all together like that, and then a couple of little daubs of paint or marker of some sort, when you get it the pump fitted and you're putting it all back together, you can line the bolts up because you're going to have the fan blades in the way as well, so it's worth doing it. Right, here we go. Got that engine steady ready as well. Pump goes on first. Careful not to damage the gasket. Push it most of the way on. Position the engine steady. One end goes in towards the chassis, the other end goes onto the bottom two bolts actually. Right, tighten those up. Now, because I've braced those nuts on, you can hold the things without making it turn. Once it's tightened up with the castellated nut, you've got to put your little split pin in this end. You've got one each end to go in there. Right, now we're going to put the gasket cement on the thread of the bolts around the other side. This is to stop the water seeping out once it gets warm. If you don't put this in, it looks fabulous for a week or so, and then you get these dribbles of rusty water. I usually find you need a screwdriver to just push the bolt in a little bit before you turn it. It just gets the thread started, particularly when you've got gasket cement on it. It doesn't like to start. Second one, all speed it up, otherwise it's like watching paint dry. Right, water pump's in position. Don't forget to put the nut on and tighten it up. Centre nut, that is. Now we'll line up the two white dots. So when the spacer goes on for the fan, there's the dot there. You've got a sporting chance, there's the other dot on the spacer. You've got a sporting chance of lining the bolts up because you're going to have the two fan blades in the way, and it is a devil of a job without that. Right, there's our dots lined up. Now you can see another reason you want that piece of cardboard there. You'll be taking the tops off your knuckles like a cheese grater. Right, that's in position. Now this is what my friend Jules calls being anal. I'm going around and putting some paint on top of the bolts that I've just taken out. Right, take out our valuable piece of cardboard, and we're going to fit the fan belt. Now, it's sometimes tricky getting the fan belt onto the bottom pulley, so I usually use a very long thin screwdriver just to guide it into position. Once you've got a bit of tension on it, it will stay there, and then you can pull the fan belt onto the dynamo. Needs to be a bit tight. There we go. Now we need to tension the dynamo so that the belt is just the right tension. There we are. Tighten the top nut up. Don't forget to tighten the two bottom ones up as well. Top up your radiator. Connect your battery. And let's give it a go. Electric pump working for the fuel. When it stops, you know you're ready to start her. Now this is the best part. You can road test it. Right, after the road test, just check we've got any leaks or not. No, everything's nice and dry.
Well, I hope you found that interesting or even helpful. Until next time, cheerio!